Welcome to Chronic Love, a supportive space for people with chronic illness. I'm Robin, a psychologist in New York City navigating the fallout of a breast cancer diagnosis some years in. And I'm on a personal journey to join together with others who have similarly found themselves facing life challenges in the wake of chronic illness. Together, with the generous humans you're about to meet, we welcome you into our discussions.
One of the other things that, I had to learn and come to terms with my diagnosis was realizing that just because I can't do something the way I want to doesn't mean that I can't do something altogether. And so for me, it's understanding, what do I value more? Do I value the end result, or do I value the process? Because and that comes into play in several different areas of my life because, as I got my diagnosis, one of the first things that happened was, you start to think about, your life flashes before your eyes, and not necessarily the things that you have done, but the stuff that you haven't gotten a chance to do yet. And all of those things kind of hit you all at once. And it's like all of a sudden we're going through this life, sort of blissfully ignorant. And then when you get a diagnosis like this, it's like all of a sudden someone stamps a time clock right above your head. And then you start to look at all of the goals and things that you want to accomplish in the time frame of that time clock. Like you have two options. You can either curl up in a ball and say, boo-hoo, I have cancer, or you can stand back up and say, okay, well, I still have stuff to do. So I'm going to go on ahead and take care of the things I got to take care of, And for me, the idea of curling up in a ball and saying boo-hoo just seemed like absolutely out of my character. Like, it's just not something I'm going to do. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. I still got to do this, or I got to take care of that. For me, I had to battle with myself, like, okay, I told myself that I wanted to wait until I was married to have kids, and I wanted to, want this big, huge wedding. I had been planning all of these things and putting all of my ducks in a row since I was, a little girl. And there's certain ways I just wanted everything to happen. And getting this diagnosis kind of threw a lot of that in a tailspin, because it was like, well, that's not going to work, honey. Even the marriage, thing. I wanted the big, huge wedding. And I still want the big, huge wedding. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's still going to be a ceremony that's happening this year. But, I'm technically already married. Right before he left to go to Korea, we were going to Vegas for my birthday anyway. And he had proposed to me the day before that. And so when we were in Vegas, we were like, when in Vegas, and so we actually got married. And so obviously that's not, you know, my big wedding with all of the bells and whistles and frilly fancy things, but the end process is still the same. And the same thing goes for me having children. I don't have any children right now, and I've always wanted to be a mother. And so one of the major things that I deal with in terms of picking myself up from the sadness is dealing with the fact that I don't know if I'm going to be able to have children. I don't know what this medication is going to do to my fertility, but just in case, I froze my eggs so that I would have that ability to even surrogate or something like that. But again, it's one of those things where end process, end result versus, process as a whole. You want to have a child, it doesn't mean you can't, it just means it may not look like the way you wanted to do it. And so for me, obviously the end process or the end result is more important to me than the process. So if something should happen where I can't have a child, then I'm okay with adopting. Or I also have 11 viable eggs that I could find a lovely little lady to surrogate for me. So there is still hope for me to have children, but it may not look like what I want it to look. Now, there's also possibility that it could look like what I want it to look like. It's a big what if, but that's not off the table. And so that's a way to stay positive, and that's a way to stay happy and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's, again, coming to terms with what is most important to you.
Before, you were talking about when you find out you have cancer, you can do one of two things, right? I think you said you can curl up into a ball and say, boo-hoo, I have cancer. Or, I don't remember your exact words, but it was something along the lines of like, you could live life, right?
Yeah, live life.
You live life, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what else are you going to do? It's put cancer in its compartment and realize that there are all these other compartments there,
Yep.
right?
And I always tell people, like just because one chapter in your story is bad, don't discount the whole book. Like you got one bad chapter in your book, but like the rest of your story, what about the rest of it? And you haven't even gotten to the end part yet. How many movies were terrible all throughout the middle and then came back and turned around at the end? You're like, actually, that was a pretty good movie. Like 9 out of 10 times, you're going to be like, actually, that's a pretty good life I had right there. So you just have to realize that, okay, so you're in a bad chapter. It's not your whole book.
If you're watching this and resonating with any of this, we want you to know that you're not in this alone, that you're never in this alone. Until next time, sending love.
Until next time, sending love.
If any of this has been helpful for you, we welcome you to go ahead and to click the like and subscribe buttons. If you'd like to join us for a candid discussion about your experience with chronic illness, or if you'd like to connect to simply say hello, we welcome you to reach out through any of the social media platforms or through our website, and all of our information is listed below.